So now we begin a new book, the book of Vayikra, or sometimes as it's referred to as Leviticus. And the name of the weekly portion is Vayikra as well. And what is the central theme of this section? One would probably not be off base if they say that the central theme is sacrifices. Indeed, that's how the Torah portion begins. God calls out to Moses, and he speaks to him from the tent of meeting, tells him to speak to the children of Israel, and tell them that if a person wants to bring a sacrifice, this is how it should be done. And he goes on to list the various kinds of sacrifices. But if we really examine the Hebrew word that people translate as sacrifice, the word is karban. Karban is not a sacrifice. The root of the word karban, karov, means something that is close, something that is near. That means that when you brought this so-called sacrifice, you were bringing yourself closer to God and also taking whatever was involved in that sacrifice and bringing that closer to God. But let me just analyze the definition of the word sacrifice as opposed to the word karban. When we talk about a sacrifice, you mean that you're going to do something to harm one thing for the benefit of something else or for a greater benefit. I guess in baseball they use the term sacrifice fly. You'll get out, you'll hit the ball, it'll be caught, but meanwhile someone else will score. So the idea of a sacrifice is that you're giving up something. And yes, indeed, that is part of this process. In life, sometimes we're called upon to sacrifice some of our own interests, some of our own pleasures for a greater good. But that's not exactly what the word karban means. Karban is essentially not a sacrifice, because if you look at the word sacrifice, you would say that everything we do is a sacrifice. We go to work. We may not like to go to work. We're sacrificing our convenience because we need the money to support our family. So you sacrifice your pleasure, your free time, in order for a greater good. And everything you do, you eat an apple, you sacrifice the apple. The apple was just a part of nature. Now you took it and it became part of you. So the truth of the matter is that there is no such thing as a real sacrifice in life, the things that we refer to as sacrifices. Rather, it's a process of conversion. That means we take the apple or the piece of meat or whatever it may be. We're not going to go into the discussion about vegetarianism right now, but you take it and you transform it, you convert it into energy to energize the person who eats that apple or whatever the food may happen to be. That's really what happens with a karban. You're taking an animal. In the case of an animal, there were also vegetative types of offerings. And instead of it being just in this level of animal, it's transformed into something human. And the human being, in turn, transforms himself into something godly. You bring it to God. And that's exactly the whole purpose of creation, to take the creation the way God put it here in front of us and change it in a way that you elevate everything. You take one item, and when they did the karbanot, the so-called sacrifices in the temple, they had inanimate minerals, they had salt, they had vegetation, they had flour and oil and wine, they had an animal, and they had a kohen, a priest, a person. And you took all these four elements that represented all these four elements of the whole world, and you elevated all of them, and that brought them closer to God, and thereby making the world fulfill its very purpose of existence. When we bring these offerings in any form, in any shape, even if we don't have the temple today, but as we're preparing ourselves for the rebuilding of the third temple, when Mashiach will take us out of exile, that is when we fulfill the ultimate purpose of elevating the whole world, that the whole world becomes a dwelling place for God. The world becomes a godly world because we did the karban. We took everything, bringing it closer so that it is now part of something higher. Everything is elevated to a higher level.